Thank you so much. And welcome to our online participants as well. As we are nearing the close of our 2 days together, we have one final presentation, a conversation, one that I believe will be especially moving and illuminating. I'm delighted to introduce Jean-Baptiste Barrìère, a composer and multimedia artist and an influential figure in the evolution of IRCAM. For our conversation today, he holds an especially unique place as Kaya Sarayahou's husband and longtime collaborator. For decades, they shared not only a life but a creative partnership and worked alongside each other through the creation of major works, including Innocence. Since her passing in 2023, he has cared for her musical estate, carrying forward the legacy of an artist whose work transformed contemporary music, and as an artist himself, who has done the same. Joining him in conversation is Steve Everett, who helped set this conference in motion, a respected composer, theorist, and interdisciplinary scholar. Stephen is the ideal interlocutor for a conversation that spans the artistic, technological, and philosophical dimensions of Sarayahou's and Barrìère's work, from the spectral and spatial innovations in Innocence to broader questions about the evolving ontology of music and creative practice. Together, Barrìère and Everett will reflect on compositional process, engagement with electronic and acoustic sound worlds, the intellectual and cultural currents that shape music, and the ways we can think about art, technology, and the future of musical creation. Please join me in welcoming Jean-Baptiste Barrìère and Stephen Everett.
Thank you, Tina, for that wonderful introduction. Sounds like we need more than an hour for those conversations, but we'll try to cram it in here 1 hour. Well, I've known Jean-Baptiste for many years, going to IRCAM myself for a long time, and that's where I met Kaya and Jean-Baptiste. And I was thinking about this conference, how great it's been to sort of explore all the different aspects of digging into her works, which I've done most of my career trying to sort of understand the evolution of her as a composer. How did she come to the language that she's developed? How did she develop those particular kind of creative tools that created that? And so, as we know, Kaya did her college study at Sibelius Academy. Following that, she did some study at Darmstadt, where she got exposed to the spectral composers, Grasset, Muray, Dufour, and so forth. And that's where she sort of found a different kind of music. Because after she had also studied at the Musikhochschule Freiburg, working with Brian Ferneyhough and with Klaus Huber. And I think for her, she had not found a voice yet that matched her own kind of imagination. I think the spectral composers kind of intrigued her. Then she goes to Paris in 1982 and starts working at IRCAM. Jean-Baptiste arrived a year before. Jean-Baptiste, which we'll find out more about him in just a second, but he was a composer from very early on. Really, he wanted to look at the relationship between science and music. He wasn't interested in the conservatory route, which maybe wasn't doing that. So he ended up getting his doctorate at the Sorbonne in philosophy. And then he became interested in another area. He started another degree at the Sorbonne in mathematical logic. So you can sort of see this is a deep thinker about, and that's why I think Pierre Boulez and people at IRCAM really saw him as somebody important. When he came to IRCAM, within a year or two, he was put in sort of overseeing all the research projects at IRCAM. IRCAM, as you know, you may have heard about this center. It really is an extraordinary place. It just finished its 50th year. And the number of composers that have gone through that and have been impacted by that, I would have to say it is the majority probably of composers around the world who have had some kind of interaction with IRCAM or the software and the techniques and the devices that have come out of that. What's great about IRCAM, they don't have full-time composers. So you, as a composer, you come into that and you get access to all these incredible thinkers, philosophers, scholars, engineers, dancers. It really is a interdisciplinary, fantastic hub for the world. And you have people from all over the world coming there all the time. This gentleman came in at a really interesting time when I think IRCAM was taking off, and there were a couple of techniques that they were developing at the time. One software program that was really an evolution of innovation at the time, which is called Chant, which I hope that Jean-Baptiste will talk more about. He was leading over that project, which Kaya, when she first got to IRCAM, started working with that software. To me, this is the beginning of the impetus for understanding her career path. I think we have to go back to that moment and really understand the kind of way she was looking at exploring, finding her own voice was maybe through some of the tools and the people she interacted with in that first 9 or 10 years that they were together at IRCAM. So I want to sort of start with that and explore a little bit about what were some of the important elements of that transition. And then also, for me, looking at Innocence, that is sort of the culmination of her career. When you look at that score, it is stunning how many of the things that I've seen her working on throughout her career have now been manifest at such a beautiful high level. Even, for example, her choral writing, which to me goes back to chant, the very beginning of how do you think about turning the human voice into something that can be manipulated scientifically and created in different ways. And so her use of choral writing, I want to get into a little bit more because I think that's an important sort of singularity of things that she developed that almost no other composer has done to that degree. But before that, as I've said, that Jean-Baptiste, he came to IRCAM, and he worked with the Chant program, which we'll talk a little bit about. He also worked with another program called Forms, which was a compositional program. That program developed into a lot of other variations of that. So when you look at the software that have come out of IRCAM, you may not know these names, but as a composer, these are programs that I have taught and composers around the world use. You've got Chant, Forms, Patchwork, Open Music. Open Music eventually developed into Max. Max is the lingua franca for computer music people around the world. That came out of IRCAM. Out of Max, you have these other libraries that have developed. Now, some of the most important ones are called Bach, which is a set of libraries in Bach, in Max. You've also got evolutions of that, which is called Cage, Dada, and they just keep going. Physical modeling software came out of that. That was an important part of Kaya's developing this kind of physical modeling of the human voice, which I think is important. So there's so much of her life that I think that she evolved finding this incredible voice. But what Jean-Baptiste was doing was there all along, sort of creating the fabric for not just her, but a lot of other people. I know you worked a lot with Jonathan Harvey, you worked a lot with Marco Stroppo. A lot of the major composers around the world have worked with Jean-Baptiste. We could probably do a whole 2-day conference on Jean-Baptiste, but we'll do that for next year sometime. But with that, I want to start just sort of have you kind of think through a little bit about when she arrived and was working with those programs. Can you talk about sort of how she was first reacting to the technologies and how she was finding those programs at that time?
Well, you opened so many doors that it will take the whole night to try to give answers to or to illustrate all the aspects that you mentioned. But to try to make a long story short, because it has been a long story, when she arrived January '82, she had already an extensive background in terms of manipulating tapes, which was bread and butter of electronic music, basically, in studios. And she had worked in Sibelius Academy Electronic Music Studio. She had worked at the radio, the Finnish radio studio. And she was also quite well introduced to live electronics as they were available at that time, which were basically black boxes doing reverberations and harmonizers and these kind of things. So she was not at all naive technically, and she was not afraid about facing technology. And that was quite necessary at that time because softwares, programs which were available were basically research tools, not production tools. They were not really oriented to be able to use by composers alone. And for that matter, there was a model which is still active, but which is much less absolutely necessary, where composers arriving to IRCAM would be addressed an assistant and would work and access to the technologies through the help of an assistant who was a person knowing and mastering the technology. So when she came, she made the stage de composition et informatique musicale, which was the one main pedagogical initiative going on there. To give you an idea, this was something which was lasting 9 weeks. It was really very intensive, and it was hands-on. This is much before there were any graphical interface, so everything had to be typed on a typesetting. It was really slow, and doing a sound, for instance, let's say a 10-second sound, it could take 1 night, or it could take 1 week. And this was extremely demanding process, and you had to be quite obstinate to continue. IRCAM was something which was like a hive, where people were working night and day. There was no real... The administrative people were appearing at office hours, but composers, they would be, let's say, on the field, because on the battlefield, because there was no other solution. You had to fight with the machine to try to get what you were imagining. And Kaya was right away very well in the ambience, and she was always a very obstinate person, really working very, very hard. And she was not afraid about that. She was not afraid about programming. And so she became very quickly acquainted with let's say, the top of the iceberg, which was the most interesting tools of the moment, which were indeed Chant, which was a program which was the first comprehensive program to try to handle singing synthesis. And this is really important indeed in the development, because if you consider that the voice, the subject of study, is certainly the most important timbral instrument, the one which has been able to carry out what we know as language. And this is precisely because it has this capacity of being proteiform, of being changing, on form in a very various ways. So working on singing synthesis was not aimed at simulation of the voice as a target, as an aim. It was a way to understand the world of sound and the world of changing sound. Something that anybody knows when practicing an instrument, which is that when you are singing or when you are playing, performing, everything has to change all the time. And by that moment, sound synthesis was extremely rigid, extremely icy, so to say, extremely cold. And something like Chant was trying to go completely the other way, trying to understand voice and the power of voice, of change, and how the evolution of expression in voice was giving cues to conceive and drive synthesis in general. So that she concentrated quite a bit of time on that. And
but it's also important to mention that that program did not use any audio files of the human voice. It was totally synthesized sounds that sounded like the human voice.
Yes.
That to me is kind of critical, because you're looking at what we hear as human voice, but what's behind that is basically mathematics and other kind of oscillators and things that are not really a sound recording of the human voice.
Yes.
So for her, she seemed like she started to think about the voice as raw material in some ways.
It will come to that. And it's a shift. It's a paradigm shift. At that time, everybody was talking about oscillators. When Barrìère was in IRCAM with Giuseppe De Giugno doing the 4X, which was the one big project of the time in terms of resources and energy and focus, it was about making 1,000 oscillators. That's the only thing that we were doing, whether coming from analog synthesizers or using programs like Music 5, which was the main original tool which was existing to do sound synthesis. But what you could learn with Chant was to build sounds completely from a different point of view. You were describing an impulse sound, something which is going to be a sound source, and then you were manipulating formants, which are basically resonances. And by manipulating these two things, you would make constantly changing sound, and always with reference to all the modes of singing and actually speaking. So that was the first endeavor, so to say. Very quickly after, something else came, which was what you mentioned, forms. Forms was the first attempt to join the control of sound synthesis with tools of a higher level, tools that would make the bridge with composition, and basically structural tools. And that, at the time, was done with a programming language, which was directly coming from artificial intelligence, which was called Lisp. And when you were using form, you were describing musical processes inside of a language, and that would be used to do everything from controlling synthesizers or controlling chant, for that matter, or controlling any other tool, and then eventually to generate scores and manipulate scores. And that's a very important step, because you could think that when you're entering into the realm of sound in this way, you may lose yourself. Being able to control the microscopic details of sound is a fantastic utopia, but it's so demanding, and especially, again, back in that time, that you start to be like in a bath of drones, and you tend to generate these kind of things because it's so difficult. It needs so much effort.
And just to clarify, forms can be used for just the compositional processes of acoustic music. It doesn't have to be with sound synthesis electronically generated sounds.
No, absolutely. And that's what she did. And that's a good example about the fact that, well, there is this image of Kaya's music, which is that it's sound worlds which are very personal and things like that. But it must be always remembered that for her, structure was always first. She would not start a piece without a very clear schema of the form, with every single duration for each part and each subpart. So she was extremely determined in terms of structural elements, and which does not mean that she was not conscious about the importance of the sounding aspect, but she wanted to be always completely in control. And what she was realizing was not a derivated illustration of the original idea. It was really the realization of the original idea.
So that reminds me, one of the people that you worked with during that time was Stephen McAdams. And Stephen McAdams, who's now a professor at McGill University, probably is the lead person in sort of redefining orchestration and our understanding of timbre and color. And he's got 30 years coming out of IRCOM doing that work. He's developed a whole system for what's called the timbre toolbox, where he's got a timbre space with all these descriptors. It's a whole new revolutionary way to think about color and timbre. And I'm wondering, because one of his articles is timbre as a structuring force in music. Yes. Which is a revolutionary idea that you don't structure with themes and as we traditional ways. The timbre itself determines the structure of the piece. Is that something that Kaya was doing?
Absolutely. To set the picture again, IRCAM was a research center, was truly a research center about music. And by then, composers could come without being upset about making a piece, producing a piece, or at least producing it right away. They could take time to work with researchers, and that's what she did precisely with Stephen McAdams. They made a couple of papers about the qualities and function of musical timbre and all these things. They made studies. They took, she was conceiving musical examples that they were testing in scientific experiment. So she went very far in the understanding of what we know about timbre, and that's a moment where she addressed more and more attention towards perception and the difference between what we conceive and what can be perceived. And that's why very soon after that, she started to use extensively analysis tools, which were trying to restitute part of what we actually perceived and how we organize perception into complex sounds and complex harmonic texture.
So that the analysis is another important sort of factor that's going on, where you have these software programs which can now break down sound qualities and show you all the overtones, show you the spectrum. That then became an important part, because when I look at Innocence, going back to that piece, when I see Innocence and I see the choral writing, which is not text-based, it's just sounds of syllables, but it's combined with the string section, you don't hear the chorus as a separate entity. It feels like it's an overtone sound resonance of the string section.
Yes.
So this idea of having analysis can show you that these particular pitches of this particular sonority can be done in a certain way that it blends them together, where the voice becomes an instrumental tonal quality at that point.
Absolutely, and that's one has to say that it's come directly from this approach to sound. What she was studying was, again, complex sounds like multiphonics, like noisy sounds in the wind instruments, and passing them through analysis program that would say what are the most important pitches into these complex sounds, what are the what is called the virtual pitch, the difference between what you get in a strict fast Fourier transform, a strict spectral analysis, because the brain does actually correct in real time the frequencies which are coming and make them something else. It makes it a series of pitches, and these pitches are not exactly what a spectra gives. And that are the kind of tools that she started to manipulate and that she manipulated until the end. At the beginning, it was only available on mainframe computers in IRCAM, and little by little, it was transported to personal computers, and she had that on a main computer. So it has been really a very formative process, even if it has to be said that she was also very free about that. That was helping her to realize her ideas, but she was never literal about what she would get from that. She would use that as an inspirational material on which she would build musical idea much more freely. And that's some sort of a nightmare, since there is a community of musicologists here. It's a sort of nightmare for musicologists, because they always want to find exactly the realization of the analysis. Well, I'm sorry, it never happens, or it's very, very rare. And when it happens, it's actually a starting point for a transition. Mary she's there. So I'd like to pay homage to what she formulated this morning, which is extremely true about the work I was composing. Everything, as I was saying earlier, and that's a lesson of sound synthesis through the teachings and the knowledge you gain with analysis. Everything has to move all the time, but it doesn't move randomly. It moves in ways which are making sense and which are biased and retransformed by our brain. And a composer today, it should be part of his or her education, because this is a knowledge and specifically available through tools which are themselves available.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, looking at the progression of her choral writing, there was a continuing increase of use of non-text-based sounds that the chorus was making. An important piece for me probably would have been the Mar, which was 1999, where there are 7 sections of that piece. It's all choral, the whole 7 sections, but pieces 1, 3, 5, and 7 are all non-text based. It's just, and you're supposed to be feeling going across the sea is the idea. The other ones, 2, 4, and 6, all had text on them. Amin Alouf was one of the poets on that. There was a pygmy ritual death idea. That was one of them. Some really interesting things. I guess she probably, in 1999, maybe Alexei was too young to be writing the libretto yet, so she had to kind of come up with other ideas. But that piece, to me, it was interesting because even when she's writing text in those sections where the chorus is singing text, there are other parts of the chorus that are just doing the ah sounds against that. So you can tell she's playing with this idea of both a choral functioning as a meaning of words and the choral sound that is not against that. And so over time, it seems like we move more and more and more away from the text-based settings. When I started thinking about, well, was she the first one to do this? And of course, you go back to Debussy with the Third Nocturne Serenes, which was all choral, no words. I think it may have been one of the first ones. And then Ravel, his Daphnis and Chloe ballet, most of that is non-text as well. Interesting in Ravel's, in writing Daphnis and Chloe, he referred to that piece as a vast musical fresco, which is what Kyra referred to this piece. I don't know whether she ever knew that Ravel said that or not, but I thought there was a really interesting parallel between those two. But this idea of using the chorus as an instrument, using it as a way to blend with other instruments, to me that's one of the most fabulous parts of her writing, is that I just love her choral writing.
Yes, and again, I think you're right to point into the moment where she started to use synthesis. She started in music with the voice. She was literally obsessed with voice, and it was so strong for her that a professor, a teacher at Sibelius Academy, Paavo Heinonen, forced her to stop using the voice for 1 year. It was a duty. And what she found through chant is a way to abstract voice from voice, so to say, and make it to become a material which can be much more fluid and without losing all the other properties, but being somehow represented and manipulated differently. And you're absolutely right. I think in her choral writing, she has inherited, so to say, her experience of working with chant.
In her early days, she was writing a lot with electronics, with instruments and the voice, so forth. She got away from that over time, and it feels like she still was using the electronics even back in those early days. Now, in retrospect, the electronics was a way to kind of also do this kind of resonance, not as a separate set of sounds, but a relationship to the acoustic instrument that may be with that, either voice or violin or cello, whatever is playing with that. So I wonder if could you talk about some of those electronic pieces, because she sort of moved away from showing technology as a factor in her works, and obviously Innocence, the technology is there, and we'll get to this a little bit later with Spat and the resonance of reverb and how she uses that in works. But those early works where there's effects on some of them, there's tapes. I mean, she was experimenting for that first 5 or 10 years, I guess, right?
Well, I think it's twofold. There is one thing which you can see the experience of electronics like propedeutics. It's really an apprentissage of the sound world in general, in the most open way. And then, exactly as you said, with chant and the voice, everything that you have learned, you can start to apply in the instrumental domain. And the way of using different modes of playing, the way of using the amplification, which is, let's say, zero level of electronics, but still, which can be important. Yeah, amplification for her was orchestration. It was definitively part of orchestration. And so that's one level. She learned so many things through electronics that at some point she could continue without it. She could apply the same kind of ideas with her experience and craft in instrumental and vocal writing. The other thing is unfortunately much more down to earth. We all know, and these representations of Innocence at the Met, we all know that every time that you add electronics, it makes things more complicated in terms of production, in terms of rehearsal time, in terms of concerns of all the party concerns, so to say. if you have a conductor, it's chamber music, the conductor is put in an awkward situation. He cannot actually control everything like he's meant to be. Electronics are taken away from him or her, and there's all sorts of unfortunate aspect of the way we practice electronics today, and which are much more, let's say, adventurous than it used to be in the 70s and the 80s, if only just for economical reasons. I mean, there is less time of rehearsal. An orchestral, or even to go to the point of Innocence, an opera rehearsal schedule, it's like a runaway train. I mean, you just can't stop everybody and say, can we come back to bar 227? I need to to control very precisely this and that. And obviously, when you have gone so far in the other way around, and spending so much time to master all the aspects, and you just can't give a proper representation of the work you've been doing, this is frustrating. And that explains why, actually, not only Kaya, but many composers, not really backed up, but were really much more razor blade about why and they are using or not electronics in situation.
So in Innocence, would you say that the components that make Innocence work are actors, singers, and the singing is obviously, you've got folk singers, you've got Sprechgesang singers, you've got bel canto style singers, you've got a whole range of singing in that. You've got actors speaking obviously various languages. You've also got orchestra. You've got chorus, which tends to be part of the orchestra many times as part of that. And then you have the electronics, which are creating the blend and the sort of connection between all of those elements, so that it's almost like it becomes another part of the instrumental fabric, the electronics. Because you're not aware of the electronics when you're listening to, but they're there, and they're a critical part of the piece. And that is put in her score, correct? That's part of the directions that the composer has specified to balance all of those other units together. It's not just acting with a libretto, it's really a sonic world that the electronics sort of pull all those sonic disparate parts together in some ways.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's very clear. If you are in a situation where you imagine things and you can't realize it, just because of practical reasons in rehearsal, it's a lesson you learn very quickly. I mean, you don't want to bang your head every single new piece, and you have to become very pragmatic. And on the other hand, of course, after 50 years of music composition, she knew better and better her tools, and she was able to do things very freely with instrument and voice, and she was only requiring electronics for very, very specific aspects. And she knew as much as she needed to be able to decide, is it worth putting everything in jeopardy in a rehearsal situation? I'm sorry I'm focusing so much about that, but it's a real world. And we tend to always forget that the reality, it's not the score. The reality, it's a situation, the score in situation in rehearsals. And we have, all of us, we have experienced so much frustration in this kind of situation with electronics. And it's not bound to be always like that. It was different at the time. And today, this is why, for instance, the composers who really want to go and continue in that direction, they more trying to work with chamber music and, if possible, soloists, because then they have a chance to get better interaction, more time, and more capacity to tune, to control very precisely the aesthetic result that they are trying to aim at.
So since Innocence has been done now, how many times? 7 performances or different productions of Innocence?
There's been, yes, this is the 7th series of the first production.
Right. So we've got some videos that Jean-Baptiste has brought to show you some of the other productions of this. But when you have another production, you go into another hall, you've got maybe different sets, so forth. So the sonic question is a really, you have to start over almost, right? As far as blending that particular hall with that particular setting of instruments and all the acoustics that are different in every space. So getting that blend perfectly so you can hear everything right, that probably takes a lot more rehearsal time than ensembles are used to.
Yes, absolutely, and that's why it's very clearly written in the score what is expected, which means the orchestra, the singers, the actors, the choir, everybody has to be mic'd. And so that actually the sound engineer who is knowledgeable, and this is Mr. Timo Koking-Kangers, who knows the score, who has worked with Kaya, is able to restitute the correct sound image which is required. This is absolute necessity. It cannot be left to somebody who doesn't understand the music, and just a sound engineer of the house who may be very qualified, but who may not have the aesthetical background and the capacity to really try to restitute what's requested by the score.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting part of understanding who Kaya Saariaho is a composer. She started out as a researcher, almost a scientist, discovering new ways of looking at sound and through obviously the tools that you were overseeing at IRCAM and so forth. But over the course of her career, she developed a whole vocabulary through those tools that allowed her to find her voice and find a way to continue growing it all the way to Innocence. Innocence is not like the other operas. I mean, you can see her evolution still happening. And that to me is what great composers do, that they don't stop with always discovering another path. And her ability to do that is just, it was remarkable. So we've got some excerpts here that, the first one I believe is an excerpt of a documentary. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, you start by the documentary, right?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Echoes of the Universe was the last documentary produced when Kaya was alive. It was started just before the COVID, unfortunately, and continued throughout the COVID. And it has gained a sort of historical importance now because it's the last moment where she could be really active and working with performers. And for that matter, this is a very precious document. So this is a trailer of this movie, which is 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Is this movie available on?
I'm working on it. It's a big, complex thing because of the copyright, as always. But
Is the trailer copyrighted?
Well, no, absolutely not. No problem for you. The trailer is on YouTube also.
Siellä alkaa se hidas jakso, niin siis se on niinku tavallaan semmoinen siirtyminen sfääreihin. Mun mielestä se on aina tosi pelottava hetki, kun sä kuvittelet musiikkia, sä kuvittelet sen musiikin luonnetta ja kuinka sitten sä ryhdyt siirtämään sitä paperille. Ja kun mä alan kirjoittamaan sitä, niin mä alan sitä myös tekemään vähän niin kuin itseltäni salaa, että alanpahan tässä vähän kirjoittelemaan, mutta tämä kaikkihan voi muuttua. Musiikki oli ollut oikeastaan mun koko elämän todella tärkeä asia, mutta mä koin itseni myös hirveän vajavaiseksi siinä ja koin sen, että mulla ei ollut tarpeeksi kykyjä esimerkiksi esiintymään, koska mä olin ihan hirveän ujo. Hei, ihana olla täällä. Hyvää päivää, rakkaat lapset. Täällä on meillä eräs oppilas Emil tuolla, joka on säveltänyt yhden pienen kappaleen. Ja nyt me ajattelimme, että tämä olisi ihana esittää teille. Aiku kiva, tosi kiva. No siis mä pyrin Sibelius-akatemiaan voidakseni opiskella Paavo Heinisen luokalla. Onneksi Paavo Heininen halusi mua opettaa, koska sävellyksen professori ei halunnut mua opettaa siitä syystä, että mä olin nainen.
Mun kuuntelukokemus Kaijan musiikista on usein sellainen, että hän luo tämmöisen 360 kolmiulotteisen tilan, johon minut kutsutaan kuulijana ja sitten mä voin olla siinä tilassa ja tavallaan niin kuin luoda oman aikajanani sen tilan sisällä.
Koko mun elämä multa on kysytty, että minkälaista musiikkia mun vanhemmat kirjoittaa. Ja sitten on tosi vaikea vastata semmoiseen kysymykseen, miten voin yhdessä tai parissa sanassa kuvailla jonkun kieltä. Sehän on, musiikkihan on kieli.
Tehdä töitä yhdessä on myös tapa viettää aikaa yhdessä. Me muuten aina tehdään omia projekteja vähän muualla, eri kaupungeissa tai maissa jopa.
The image is in itself inspired both by the Northern Lights and by the music itself. And when we do it as a live version, I can actually control some of the parameters live.
We are a group of people from another generation that is now taking over your music, and I think that must be quite interesting.
It's really enriching for me and it's so interesting. But of course it makes me realize how long time I have been composing and how old I am, or how old I must be. Like seeing Alisa conducting Lichtbogen.
Yeah, that's surreal, I can imagine.
I mean, what? I never even thought that I would have children when I composed that piece.
Yeah.
As a performer, I think my duty is to also show to the people that it's not the work of a female composer, but just of a great composer, as great as Beethoven, Sibelius, or Bach, in my opinion.
I do hope you get copyright so we can see the whole hour of that. It was interesting to see the children there, because I know Kaya has composed quite a few children's choral pieces for them to sing around. So I think that's great that she's kind of feeding the younger generations to get understanding for how better choral work. The next work is this music theater from River from Gelsenkirchen. Do you want to?
That was the first other production of Innocence.
So this is a short trailer of this.
Das Stück ist eine richtig klassische Tragödie. Also es ist eigentlich eine griechische Tragödie, in der es ein Dilemma gibt. Und es gibt eine Menge von unschuldig Schuldigen. Also wir befinden uns ja im Stück an diesem einen besonderen Tag. Also 10 Jahre davor ist dieses Attentat passiert. Der Täter war im Gefängnis. Zeitgleich mit seiner Entlassung trifft sich seine Familie, um zu heiraten.
Es hat ein hohes Tempo an Ereignissen und an Wechsel, daher vielleicht eine Assoziation zur Filmmusik, aber es ist auf keinen Fall eine Untermalung oder es ist auf keinen Fall eine Bebilderung von irgendwas Optischen oder irgendwelche Texte, die gezeigt werden, sondern es ist ganz was Eigenständiges.
Theresa ist eine Frau, die ihre Tochter vor 10 Jahren verloren hat. Und sie kommt in diese Hochzeitsfeier als Dienerin, lebt ihr Leben nicht mehr. Seit die Tochter gestorben ist, ist sie einfach nicht mehr so richtig da. Sie will sie nicht loslassen und alles kommt in ihr hoch.
Marketta is like a sad character because she was like, she's so full of promises, but then she never got to grow up. Her mother's point of view, she's an angel. She's this lovely girl, but also she's not really this perfect victim. She's very like dark and mean, and she's a bully.
Ich glaube, das ist etwas ganz Aktuelles auch. Es passiert sehr viele Dinge in der Schule auch. Sehr viele Kinder, die viel erlebt haben. Und das sind Dinge, die unterschwellig sind. Und das auf der Bühne zu sehen, noch musikalisch und auf unterschiedlichen Sprachen, international, mit Leuten, die auch aus unterschiedlichen Milieus kommen. Schauspiel, Physiker, Theater, Tanz, Musical, Opera. Also ich finde, das ist etwas, was ganz Besonderes ist. Und auch die Musik, die hat was ganz Starkes.
Die Musik ist vor allem sehr empathisch. Es empfindet sehr stark nach, was die Figuren empfinden, aber es gibt jetzt keine zusätzliche Interpretation oder Emotion noch dazu. Ich würde sagen, das ist Musik, die sehr gut das gesungene Wort zuhört und darauf sehr feinfühlig reagiert.
Everyone is at least bilingual. Some people speak several languages. People switching from language to language to try and make themselves understood, to make people understand them, to get their feelings across. Languages can be isolating as well as bringing people together, because words they're necessary for us to communicate, but they're not sufficient.
Das ist das Besondere an diesem Stück, weil es ist eigentlich keine Oper. Es ist Musik, Theater, Schrägstrich, Film, Schrägstrich, zeitgenössisches Drama, zeitgenössische Tragödie, die wirklich jeder von uns passieren könnte.
This was 2024. So, Olga, were you in this production? Ah.
That's the next comment.
Okay, one more. So next we have the Staatstheater, Nuremberg, 2000. Okay. And then one more? Okay.
That's the latest.
All right.
Can't go to work. In the CH.
And I believe that was 2025. And then one more excerpt. And this is the one that I would love to get some more explanation of. This is quite an extraordinary little clip here. So we'll watch it, and then maybe you can tell me how this evolved. Any thoughts on that? What's going on for this?
Well, in the last one in Dresden, it's like psychoanalytic or pseudo-psychoanalytic rewriting. It's completely in a dream world, and Marketa is actually a zombie, which is taken out from the grave at the beginning by the other actors. And that I would be in a very difficult situation to tell you what is happening. And I really wonder what the audience felt, because it's taking so much, I would not say freedom, but it's rewriting, like in Regis theater, in general, the libretto. It's making it something different, which, as you could see visually, looks very much like the Tim Burton world and Innocence in Tim Burton world. So that's completely something else. And well, that's something I really don't know what Kaya would have thought, but she's been exposed to that before with L'Amour de Loin. L'Amour de Loin has known 15 different productions, and there were things which were extraordinarily far from the first production of Peter Sellars, and with explicit sexual content and things like that. That was really not the cup of tea of Kaya in any case. So she was able to cope with that as long as this was not affecting the music. And it was always clear in her mind that this is the field, this is the freedom of the stage director. And she could assume, until at least a certain point, that there would be something which does contradict what she was hoping. And for that matter, it was discussed yesterday, the importance of the blood in Simon Stone production. She was absolutely against that, and she really fought until the last moment, and actually Simon had promised to remove it, and well, he went over, and so, okay, that's how it is.
Well, I guess, I mean, that is the life of an opera now. I mean, where you have different directors taking it, and they're going to create their own vision. That will be the life of these works, is what we're seeing here. Just like, you know, we just had at the Met, we had Tristan and Isolde recently, which was a fantastic production by Yuval Sharon, who designed this sort of tube that they were working in, but also that tube changed the acoustics so that if you were sitting in any of the balconies, you couldn't hear the singers. And so if you were on orchestra level, it sounded fine, but no one had thought about the fact that the sound is not going up from that. So there were lots of complaints because acoustically that set did not really serve the music very well, obviously. So that's where, you.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what I meant. And us today, in front of that, we can just try to stick to this idea. As long as the music is respected, well, this is the prerogative of the stage director, and he can take what is offered as material as far as he wants. But often this is really at the verge of being impossible. And Olga knows that I was fairly unhappy about several things in Dresden because the director went, for me, went too far. He really asked some things that dramatically, literally provoked change in the music by being this feature point, the Marketa, the zombie started to have screams that were absolutely out of the score, and that I had to say, well, I'm sorry, but this is not possible. This is going too far, and there are limits, and the limits are the score. There are many ways you can interpret the score, and of course, but there are things which cannot go over the musical character.
Are there other productions already planned for Innocence in the future?
This year, there will be two new ones. So by the end of 26, we will have 6 different productions. And this one is continuing to Copenhagen and to Opéra Bastille in Paris, where I suppose it's probably going to stop as such. But there are other productions which are on the plan. There is one in Barcelona, which will be shared with the Barrìère, the Munich Opera. And other projects we may not know yet.
So it will continue to have a life of its own, we hope, for a very long time. Yeah. In the few minutes we've got left, I want to ask Jean-Baptiste, Kaya has worked on this idea of love, death, trauma, has been a theme that she's worked on for much of her career. Perhaps the ultimate trauma was her passing. And the last piece that she actually composed is the trumpet concerto, Hush. Not too many people have heard that work, but you have a clip from it. Would you like to talk about her writing that work and what was happening with her and what the piece is about?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. The theme of this conference is voicing innocence. And as we mentioned, voice has been so important. Sorry, in the music. I'm sorry. In Hush, which is a concerto for trumpet, which is the last piece that she was able to compose, and she knew and she conceived the piece as her last piece. There is, for the last time, voice, and I wanted to show that.
Yeah, the work was completed, I believe, in March of 2023, March 24th, I think, 25th. And then she passed a couple of months later on June 2nd, 2023. And then the premiere was in Helsinki in August 24th, I believe, of that year. So she obviously is a posthumous performance. So this is a clip. There are four movements to the concerto. This is the end of the second movement and the third movement. And the third movement, Kaya mentioned in the notes that this, for her, was sort of her realization of being in the fMRI and hearing the sound of that machine. But also the fact of going into the fourth movement, which the titles of these movements were taken from some text that Alexei had written for the second version of her first concerto, which was the violin concerto, Graal Theater. And later that concerto, Alexei had the idea of sort of adding some text that would be read to that. So the titles of Hush, the name of this trumpet concerto, are from that text. And the last movement is called Ink the Silence. And Jean-Baptiste told me that is what is inscribed on her grave, is those words. So you will hear the trumpet in the middle of the third movement go into something that, I'm a trumpet player many years. It's almost like there's a rupture in the sound, and you'll hear that as something that just is nothing like she's ever composed before. It's really a stunning moment. So here's the clip. The piece goes on into the fourth movement, which is Ink the Silence. The premiere performance of this is available on YouTube with Suzanne Maliki conducting at the premiere of this. If you want to see the whole thing, it's really a stunning work.
And this version is available on Arte concerts for people who can access to Arte.
Well, that's the extraordinary life of Kaya Saariaho. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it's not easy for your family. So Tina said we had a little extra time for questions. We don't have to quit, so we have a few more 5 minutes. We got some questions. Anybody have questions you'd like to ask Jean-Baptiste? Jean-Baptiste was with her pretty much the entire arc of her career, so it's an amazing partnership that they had for that 40, 50 years together. I don't know what you're together. Yes.
I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit about the visual work that you collaborated with her on certain solo pieces, and yeah.
Well, we did collaborate on this kind of things for the last 20 years. It nearly happened by accident because I was working. Of course, I contributed to the electronics of many of their pieces, and I was making my own projects, which were mixing instruments, electronics, and video. And at some point in 2000, Kent Nagano was making a reprise of L'Amour de Loin. And he had seen my videos, and he was making it in Berlin with the Deutsche Orchestra Berlin. And he asked me, would I be interested to make a video version for the performance of L'Amour de Loin? And that came as a surprise. It was not at all planned, really. And so we started to discuss everything that formally, in terms of what can be achieved with video, would make sense within the aesthetical realm of what I've been doing with video in general, which is really the prolongation of music and the prolongation of, to be more specific, the prolongation of electronics by other means. And with a very strong borderline, which is to say that by no means at any point the video must fight against the music. It must serve the music. So in that sense, it can be considered from a certain point of view very unsatisfying for some artists who want to develop their own discourse inside of the video or visual dimension. Everything I'm doing and everything I've been doing from then, which I'm still doing now on the music of Kaya, is meant to serve the music and to make it more understandable, so to say. Not that I believe that it needs it, and that's really the paradox and the difficulty. How do you add something which is already self-content and which doesn't require anything anymore? But translating ideas, musical ideas, in ways which I hope are helping to understand some of the aspects of the music. So that's something which has been going on for about 20 years, and it has been done. We saw a little bit of the video for Lichtbogen, which is actually an installation which has been turning all around the world. But most of what I did after L'Amour de Loin is, as you mentioned, chamber music, actually, and solo performer. For all the practical reasons I mentioned before, that we never have the conditions to work these kind of things properly. Because my approach to this is to bring the performers, the singers and the instrumentalists inside of the video with cameras, live cameras. And this is extremely difficult to realize properly in, let's say, the normal conditions. And to make a long story short, the rehearsal conditions and presentation of concerts are more and more normalized for all the same reasons. And this is really going the other way of trying to make something which is very specific, in situ, taking in account all the aspects of a specific place and bringing it to a special life. And what to say more? It continues because there are more projects in that domain, and of course it's a privilege to continue to work on their music in that way.
If you've not had a chance, look at YouTube. A lot of these videos that Jean-Baptiste has done with Kaya's work and also his own works, they're all on YouTube, and they're just beautiful visuals on that. So, other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Jean-Baptiste Barrìère, for joining us.